Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, we're going to go ahead and dive in the book of Genesis. I know that a lot of people may think that it's boring, but it's actually one of my favorite books because it automatically starts talking about the history of humanity. So we know at the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now let's pause for a minute to understand that I still ask of you to try to read the Bible on your own time. I am only kind of discussing a summary and what I've gathered so far. I have already fully read and studied the Bible. This is just me doing it again because every season of your life, you will figure out that when you read the Bible, you start gaining different information and more wisdom. I hope that made sense. This time around, because I've already known what happens, it's like now it's revealing, God is revealing more. So imagine the most beautiful paradise that you could think of, like Bora Bora, Bora boring. Sorry, I had to say it. But think of the most beautiful paradise, Bora Bora, the Philippines, whatever you can imagine. Just for a moment, think of that. And of all the fruit trees around you, so many different variety of fruits, animals, just quietness, tranquility, just amazing. So God was like, I need to have someone to upkeep this beautiful paradise. So God was like, okay, I'm gonna create a man. And he created Adam. Then with Adam, he was like, you know what? Go ahead and name all the animals that I've created. Like, it's up to you. So Adam started naming them. And then God was like, all right, he needs someone else because the animals aren't going to fulfill him. If you read Genesis chapter 2, verse 21 through 24, it talks about how God made Adam fall into deep sleep, and then he took out one of his ribs, one of Adam's ribs, by the way, and created a woman. So this is why it's called a woman, because she came from man. That explains it in that chapter. So he created Eve, and he was like, hey, this is all yours. Eat all the fruit that you want, all the trees except for one, the tree of life or tree of knowledge, which equals immorality. Now, keep in mind that God did create Adam and Eve with free will. He created all of us with that, which is why we get to choose what we want to do. We get to choose if we want to steal a candy or not. We get to choose if we want to lie to this person or not. He gave us free will from the beginning. So, y'all know what happened. The serpent came, the devil came, and he manipulated Eve and told her, God is trying to hide this from you. And in a nutshell, she tried to be like God. That's why she ate from that fruit tree. This was not an apple tree. I don't know where people get that from, but it was not an apple tree. It's just a tree. Don't know what kind of fruit. It didn't specify in Hebrew. So she ate from the tree, and then she convinced Adam. She took that piece of fruit and was like, hey, try some of this. And he was like, no, I don't think we're supposed to. And then she convinced him. He was like, all right, cool. He took a bite, and then the veil from their eyes was removed, which means that now they are ashamed of being naked. So they cover themselves with leaves. So then God showed up, and he was like, where y'all at? And they were hiding behind a bush, and they're like, well, we're naked, we're ashamed, like, we don't want you to see us. They're like, who told you were naked? How do you know this? And well, obviously he knew that they ate from that tree. So he was like, all right, well, because you did this. So chapter 3, verse 14 all the way through 16, it says, so the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. The woman To the woman, he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you, which in Hebrew means teshakwa. Teshukwa. I don't know how to speak Hebrew. To Adam, he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. This is very deep. So to remain in God's presence and eat of the tree of life would have resulted in them becoming immoral, thus thwarting the penalty of their transgression. So Eve equals the mother of all life. That's what it means. And then to be cut off from God's presence is immorality that was unavailable. So basically, God was not going to be available to them as he would have if they had, they didn't eat from that tree. Now we move to chapter 4 and we start hearing about Cain and Abel. So Adam and Eve had two boys. Cain was the oldest and then Abel was the youngest. So Cain means Quanah in Hebrew, and then Abel means Havel in Hebrew, which means breathe. And then for Cain, it means to acquire, create, or produce. Yeah, Adam named everything weirdly. Cain and Abel had to give God offerings. Cain wasn't putting his effort. He was kind of just like, whatever, I'm gonna just give what I can. And then Abel was actually putting in effort. So God favored Abel because of that, because he showed that he truly cared. As for Cain, God was like, well, do better next time, obviously in a loving way, but Cain took it wrong and he was like, I'm gonna kill my brother because now I'm jealous. And God was like, hey, hold on. And this is in chapter 4, verse 6. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Let's think about this for a second because this is very deep. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. When that veil from Adam and Eve's eyes were removed, we automatically came into sin. So now there's selfishness, there's self-righteousness, all these things that we are doing, and it automatically comes. So I remember that my pastor talked in service about how a toddler automatically was born into selfishness and knows about selfishness. The kid is like, mine, 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 give me, give me, give me. I want this, I want that. And no one taught the kid that. So obviously Cain already knew about selfishness. So if you didn't know, the Old Testament is before Jesus, the Messiah, the anointed one. The people in the Old Testament basically prepared the way. John the Baptist was the last prophet ever because he actually cleared the way for Jesus, and then Jesus came, and that would be the New Testament of the books. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but right now we are reading the Old Testament for those that don't know or have never read the Bible. Well, in chapter 4, verse 8, it automatically starts talking about how Cain plotted to kill Abel, and he did. He was successful. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother? I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's keeper? So Cain just committed a huge crime. He just killed his own brother. And on top of that, when God was like, hey, where's your brother at? Cain lied and was like, I don't know. Like, I don't keep tabs on him. Wow, Cain. Wow. But God already knew that. He was like, what have you done? What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. So Cain is now a vagrant and an outcast, and Cain was very afraid that he will be cut off from Yahweh or God. So that was his biggest fear, but God still has some grace. God is a very merciful God. So he still has some grace, and he was like, nobody touches him. Like, revenge is upon you, right? So then Cain had kids. He made love to his wife, and they had a son named Lamech. Now, Lamech had two wives. God is not okay with having two wives. It does talk about it later down the Bible. This man killed someone that was younger than him, making him very arrogant because he tried to justify the killing. Or he's probably trying to intimidate his wives. I'm not too sure what he was saying, but if we read down to chapter 4, verse 23 through 24. Ada and Silla, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. So he tried to justify the killing. First, he killed a young man, and he killed because Cain did the same with Abel. So he was like, well, if my daddy did it, I'm going to do it too. And that's not how it works. So then that's all we have for now here. Then it talks about how Adam and Eve had another son. His name is Seth, which means to place. God has granted me another child in place of Abel since Cain killed him. Seth also had a son, and his name was Enosh. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. Chapter 5 talks about Adam, from Adam to Noah, so it talks about the generations. Now, most people already know about Noah's Ark, so this is going to dive into that. And just an FYI, people used to live over 700 years back then. I don't know what they would do because I would be bored. I'm 31 and I am already bored with life. So I don't know what they would do. In chapter 5, it talks about the family and it talks about Enoch. We'll get to that in another episode. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and talk about the wickedness of the world. So this goes to chapter 6. When human beings began to increase in numbers on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. So, if you read the book of Enoch, the reason why it's not in the Bible, it's because it was never confirmed that Enoch wrote it. It was written years later, but I feel like it's really good to read if and when you have fully studied your Bible, because if not, if you are a baby in faith, you will get very confused. So I would not recommend you to read it right now. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to read about. I've read it. I have not fully read it, but I have read it, some of the chapters. So right here, it talks about sons of God, which means that God brought angels here and they were basically getting in with the woman. If y'all have not seen the Noah's Ark movie, I don't know the actors, but it kind of talks about that, so I would definitely watch it if you're more of a visual person. So the wickedness on earth increased, thus they will only last up to 120 years. Like God was like, I'm gonna reduce your years, but there were some exceptions. Like certain people did last a little bit longer. And here it talks about Nephilim, which is gigantic people, basically like Sasquatch. Like they were tall, they were huge people. When the angels were having sexy time with the humans. God was not okay with this, by the way, at all. He was like, like, what have you done? Now you've ruined everything. And then it talks about Noah and the flood. So Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, which means that mostly everybody was very sinful, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Jep. I call him Jep because I don't feel like pronouncing his whole name, but if y'all want to, y'all can. And then, as y'all know, God instructed Noah to create the ark, to get pairs of animals, and then like pairs, which means in twos of different kinds of animals, and then on top of that, get other animals for sacrifices. Because remember, it goes all from the beginning. Now that they don't have a close relationship to God, now God requires you to sacrifice an animal. So this is what it's talking about. This is why we say that Jesus was the last sacrificial lamb. So the Lord once the ark was built, the Lord then shut Noah in, like he just shut him in. He was like, get inside. And then the flood happened. I want you guys to take the time and fully read this and study this because it'll give you more of an insight. If you keep reading the Old Testament, it talks about how Sodom and Gomorrah, for example, the sexual sin was so bad that 2 angels came to warn Lot, and the people in the whole town in Sodom were trying to rape the 2 angels. Like, that's how bad sin was. So now, moving forward to chapter 8. Chapter 8 talks, this is very, very powerful verse. It's chapter 8, verse 21. So I'm not reading off of it, but the notes that I've gathered. The heart of humankind is evil. God is aware that humans will continue to be wicked. But after the flood, I'm guessing that God felt bad because he was like, I'm never doing this again. It doesn't matter how evil people are. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to flood the whole world. So God's covenant with Noah. God was basically telling Noah, every time you see the rainbow, think of our promise, like my promise to you that I'm never going to destroy everyone and that I love you. So be fruitful, go have kids. If we keep reading chapter 9 at the end, this kind of threw me off this time because, again, like I said, I haven't fully studied Genesis because I used to think it was boring. And even when I did read it, it was just confusing. But for you to understand, you have to know how things worked back then. So the sons of Noah, it talks about how at this point, like, they already found land, and Noah made a vineyard, and he was getting drunk. At this one time, he was like plastered. He was out of it, where the sons, like, I guess Noah was naked, he was naked, and his other two sons went to cover him, but they walked him backwards out of respect because they didn't want to see their dad, even though it wasn't much of a sin, like a bad sin, if you were to see your father naked. However, Mr. Ham, remember this, what I'm about to say. So Ham is the father of Canaan. So Ham went inside and he was like making fun of his father. That's from what I catch the first time. But when I dove in Hebrew, it talks about how it could have been that Ham's offense was probably sexual pleasure from either watching or him doing sexual activity or rape with his mother or with his father, Noah. So this is why it talks about this. Let me go ahead and read it. But Shem and Jep, his name is Japheth, I don't know how to pronounce it. When Shem and Jep took a garment and laid it across their shoulders, then they walked in backwards and covered their father's naked body. Their faces were turned the other way so that they would not see their father naked. When Noah awoke from his wine and found out that his youngest son, what he has done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves, he will be to his brothers." He also said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend Jeb's territory. May Jeb live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be the slave of Jeb." Basically saying, like, Canaan, the lowest of the lowest, and throughout the Bible you'll hear about the Canaanites, that they were bad people. So let's talk about this for a moment, because it could have been that Ham raped his mother and she got knocked up by him. So this was very common back then when you start reading and diving into the Bible. Ham's crime of possibly raping his mother would have been an attempt to usurp Noah's position as leader of the family clan. By telling his brothers he has asserted authority over them, like saying, like, I run this because I just did this, and look what I could do, bragging about it, right? So it could have been that Canaan was actually his baby. We're not too sure because that's all it says. And then it talks about the table of nations in chapter 10. It breaks down like Jeb's kids, Ham's kids. Chapter 11 starts talking about the Tower of Babel. Everyone used to speak the same language, and these people tried to create like the tallest tower so that they can reach God. And God was like, you ain't gonna do that, not on my watch. So he switched everyone's language, which is why now we have English, Spanish, Hebrew, other languages that I can't think of right now, because of that reason. So that's what it talks about. And then it talks again about the firstborn son, the descendants, the call of Abram. I want to say this to make it easier for everyone. The reason why they are writing people's names, it's because it all comes down to the line of David, King David. So the reason why everything is lined up, it's because it all comes down to Jesus and his family line. So Jesus is not only King of Kings, he's actually the king in flesh, but because of the history that happened behind it, he was basically not seen as king. He was very humble. We're not gonna go into detail. Abram is Abraham, but God switched up his name to Abraham. I think I'm gonna go ahead and end it right here, because if not, we are going to get so confused. Next episode, I am going to post another person's testimony, and the one after that, I'm going to continue. We did stop on chapter 12 in Genesis, but take the time to study your Bible. Now, there is this app that I do use. I do not get paid to promote this, by the way. It's just that it's very helpful. It's called the Logos Bible app. It's like a little blue square with a white cross in the middle. It's the Google Chrome of Bibles. It has so many different books in there. So whenever you open the little plus sign, you click on it and then type in Faith Life Study Bible. This dissects and explains every verse also in Hebrew. This is how I learned so much. Hopefully this helps you. And if you have any questions, reach out. If you want to share your testimony, let me know. Website is www.senoritaswithcristo.com. I hope that everyone has a wonderful and blessed day. Goodbye.